Tonight's episode is different. This isn't a solve stream, it isn't speculation, and it isn't about chasing the latest theory. Tonight, we're stepping back and looking at something deeper. Two treasure hunts, two books, two very different minds behind them. For years, this community has focused on where to search. Tonight, we're focusing on how we think, because how a hunt is designed changes how people behave, how long they stay committed, and how often they get stuck. This conversation marks a turning point for this channel. If you were part of the Forrest Fenn era, or if you're now stepping into Justin Posey's hunt, this episode will change how you approach the game. Stay with us.
Good evening, everyone. For a long time, treasure hunting content has been about clues, locations, and theories. Tonight is not that. Tonight is about design. We're going to compare two books that define two different eras of treasure hunting, Forrest Fenn's The Thrill of the Chase and Justin Posey's Beyond the Map's Edge. Not to judge them, not to solve them, but to understand what they force hunters to do differently, because these aren't just stories, they're systems. And if you don't understand the system you're playing inside, you'll repeat the same mistakes no matter how smart you are. This episode represents a shift for AGK. We're moving beyond speculation and into structured analysis that actually helps people think more clearly. Settle in. This one matters.
Jason, could you give your intro beginning with patterns don't just live in books?
Patterns don't just live in books. They live in the minds of those who craft these hunts. Tonight, we're going to unpack those patterns, what Forrest Fenn left behind, and how Justin Posey is building upon them. By the end, you'll see not just two treasure hunts, but two philosophies on how to challenge us all.
Jason, I'd like to make a couple of announcements before we get started. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. Take your time with the announcements. Once you're ready to dive in, we'll pick right back up. I'm here when you need me.
I've got a couple of announcements to make. The first is that the Super Chat light is lit, so we are now re-monetized, I guess. So if you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, you can use the Super Chat to do it. Secondly, the next two episodes of AGK will occur on Tuesday, the 23rd, and the following Tuesday on the 30th. And the reason I'm doing that is the next two Wednesdays fall on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. So we're going to do it the Tuesday before. All right, keep that in mind. You'll see it, of course. Tonight, we're going to be discussing Jason's comparison of two books, Forrest Fenn's The Thrill of the Chase and Justin Posey's Beyond the Map's Edge. Before we get into questions, I want to explain how tonight is structured. We're going to walk through 5 core axes, 5 design dimensions, where these two hunts differ in meaningful ways. Each axis answers a simple question. What does this difference force a hunter to do differently in the real world? We introduce each axis, then talk through it together. If you stay with us through all 5, you'll come away with something far more valuable than a theory. You'll have a clearer understanding of how to approach this hunt and future ones without burning yourself out. Let's start with the first. The first axis is where authority lives in the hunt. In the Forrest Fenn hunt, authority lived with Forrest. The poem was opaque, the memoir was loose, and meaning accumulated socially through interviews, forums, lore, and endless secondhand interpretations. Hunters constantly asked, what did Forrest really mean? In Justin's hunt, authority is deliberately pushed away from the author and into the structure itself. The poem, the book, and the media are all linked. Checkpoints are promised. You're told the system will tell you when you're right. This single design choice radically changes hunter behavior. One hunt encourages deferral of judgment. The other forces internal verification. That difference matters more than any individual clue. Now, give me a moment to bring Jason on board to start the Q&A. Jason, are you ready for the Q&A for Axis 1
I'm ready. Let's dive right into the questions and unpack how this shift in authority plays out for hunters. Fire away.
Jason, I just want to make sure there seems to be a bit of a delay between the end of my conversation and the beginning of yours. Anything that you could do to speed that up, I would appreciate. The other thing is, I want to give you the freedom to be as open and detailed as you can with each one of your responses while still maintaining a level of integrity and not getting into hypotheticals. But I really enjoy listening to your opinions on the matter. And so take your time about your answers. There is no reason to rush any of this. We can be on here as long as we want. By the way, for those of you in the audience, if you have any questions for Jason, just put them into the chat room. And as I get to the end of tonight's show, I'll pull those questions up and we can take a look at them. All right. Axis 1, the questions: where authority lives. Jason, during the Fenn hunt, why did people gradually stop trusting their own judgment?
In Fenn's hunt, the ambiguity in the poem and his penchant for mischief created an environment where hunters constantly doubted themselves. Without clear checkpoints, people looked to Fenn's interviews, forums, and group theories for validation. Over time, this turned into outsourcing judgment, trusting external voices over their own instincts.
Outsourcing judgment. I've never heard you use that phrase before. Could you define that for our audience, please?
Outsourcing judgment is when a hunter stops relying on their own analysis and starts seeking answers from others, be it forums, groupthink, or perceived experts. Essentially, they hand over their confidence to external voices rather than trusting their own reasoning.
We were a YouTube channel during that period. I wouldn't like to think that we had become one of those influencers that became a surrogate figure. You've looked at some of our YouTube work from prior to this time. What do you think?
You were part of the broader conversation, sure, but I wouldn't call you a surrogate authority figure. You encouraged people to think, ask questions, and bring their own analysis. That's a healthy approach, not blind outsourcing.
Jason, how did forums and influencers become surrogate authority figures in the Fenn hunt?
In the Fenn hunt, ambiguity led people to seek certainty. Over time, vocal influencers or popular forum voices filled that gap. People started treating these interpretations almost as canon. It was easier to trust someone confident than to live in the uncertainty of one's own judgment.
Why is that bad?
When you rely on external voices too much, you stop honing your own reasoning. You chase popular theories instead of original ones. That stifles creativity and leads to groupthink. In a treasure hunt, it means you miss the actual path because you're following someone else's echo.
When does collaboration become dependency in a hunt?
Collaboration crosses into dependency when you're no longer using others as sounding boards, but waiting on them to tell you what's real. If you stop making decisions until someone else confirms them for you, that's dependency, and it strips away the personal adventure.
Do you see Posey intentionally trying to prevent that dependency?
Yes, Posey's design suggests he's deliberately trying to avoid it. By embedding verification points, checkpoints that confirm progress, he's telling hunters the structure itself will guide them. You rely on the puzzle, not on his whims or public interpretation.
So this is a question of curiosity. You've explored the Fenn book, you've explored the Posey book. I focused on the Fenn, but let's say you were in a situation where that the Forrest Fenn treasure hunt was still active, running alongside the Posey hunt. If you had a choice now to invest your time and effort into the Fenn hunt or the Posey hunt, which would you choose?
I choose the Posey hunt, not because it's easier, but because it offers clear structure and guardrails. It still demands skill, but it reduces randomness. I'd rather test intellect and intuition than luck.
What does it feel like psychologically to hunt without external confirmation?
It's challenging. Your self doubt grows louder. Without external confirmation, you feel like you're in a constant fog. But when you do make progress, the confidence you build is genuine. It's all on you, and that's a mix of pressure and freedom.
What does that freedom buy me?
That freedom buys you ownership. Every breakthrough is truly yours. Your reasoning, your path. It's no one else's borrowed insight. And if you fail, you can pivot freely. No waiting on anyone else. It's your adventure in full.
How should treasure hunters resist the urge to outsource certainty?
They should set personal milestones, decide how far they'll trust their own solve before seeking input. Reflect often. Am I thinking or just echoing? Treat outside input as inspiration, not gospel. And always remember, if you solve it yourself, the win is truly yours.
Is there a healthy role for community at all in Posey system?
Absolutely. Community can still share ideas, explore different angles, and provide emotional support. The difference is you're sharing perspectives, not waiting for community validation to move forward. It's collaboration, not dependency.
What warning signs tell you you're deferring too much?
If you find yourself constantly waiting for others to confirm or dismiss your ideas, that's a warning. Another sign, if you feel paralyzed until you've checked what the community thinks. In short, if you're waiting more than acting, it's time to recalibrate.
So explain to me then how, as an individual treasure hunter, how do I interact with a community if there's a tendency to allow them to influence my own thinking? I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Think of community as a brainstorming partner, not a judge. You can exchange ideas, get inspired, or hear angles you missed, but you always return to your own puzzle, making the final judgment calls yourself. Let the community spark thought, not decide for you.
As a content creator, how can I work to ensure that the community trusts what I'm doing, but the treasure hunter, the individual treasure hunter, trusts it even more?
As a creator, focus on empowering critical thinking. Instead of offering answers, offer frameworks. Show how you break down problems, not just conclusions. Encourage viewers to pause, reflect, and apply your reasoning to their own ideas. In short, guide them toward trusting their own process, not just your voice.
So, Jason, let's go on to the second axis. The second axis is how ambiguity is used. Fenn's ambiguity is romantic, vague language is an invitation. There are no explicit stopping points. Ambiguity can stretch forever. For many hunters, that ambiguity became the puzzle itself. Posey's ambiguity is instrumental. It exists only until it collapses. Checkpoints are designed to convert uncertainty into certainty. Ambiguity isn't bait, it's a filter. Understanding which kind of ambiguity you're dealing with determines whether you keep moving or you spiral out of control. What are your thoughts on that statement?
I think that statement nails it. Fenn's ambiguity was open-ended, almost poetic for its own sake. It kept people guessing forever. Posey's ambiguity is a tool. It's meant to be temporary. Once you solve it, you move forward. It's a much tighter system.
Well, let's go on to those Axis 2 questions then. Why did every vague line in Fenn's poem become a puzzle?
Fenn's poem offered no clear resolution points. Without a system to confirm progress, hunters assumed every vague word might be critical. Ambiguity wasn't something you solved, it was something you lived in. So naturally, people dissected every line as a potential key.
If every line is dissected as a potential key, how do you solve a treasure hunt that's based on a poem?
You have to establish a framework. Not every word can be equally weighted. Define what you believe the poem's structure is. Prioritize the lines that fit that structure logically or thematically. In other words, you solve it by choosing which ambiguity matters rather than treating all ambiguity as equal.
So, how do hunters decide which ambiguity to chase? That sounds like an anachronistic.
Hunters need a guiding principle. For example, do only chase ambiguities that have a logical connection to prior clues. If it's just a wild guess or feels endless, set it aside. In short, they solve ambiguity by tying it to a broader reasoning process, not by chasing every open-ended clue.
Well, unfortunately, the effect of making selections when it comes to ambiguity is if at the beginning of the chase, your first or second choice is the incorrect selection of ambiguity, you are off track from that point forward. You'd have to go back to the beginning to restart. That seems to me as like a wasted effort. How do I avoid that? How do I test the ambiguities to determine which one actually leads me down a chain of correctness, if you will?
You avoid early missteps by demanding cross-confirmation. Don't commit to an ambiguity until it aligns with something else, whether it's a known clue, a geographic fact, or a structural pattern. Treat each ambiguity as a hypothesis. Test it quickly. If it leads nowhere, reset early. It's about making ambiguity prove itself before you go all in.
Define ambiguity for me in the manner in which you are using it in this context.
In this context, ambiguity means any clue, phrase, or element that's open to multiple interpretations, where the meaning isn't clear-cut. In a hunt, ambiguity is what makes you pause and wonder, does this line mean X or Y? It's the uncertainty that forces a hunter to choose one path over another.
Why does ambiguity feel productive even when it isn't?
Ambiguity feels productive because it keeps your mind busy. When you're puzzling over it, you feel like you're making progress, even if you're just spinning wheels. It gives the illusion of action, which can be comforting, even when it's not leading you anywhere.
How did ambiguity lock people into bad solutions?
When hunters fixated on ambiguous lines without external confirmation, they'd follow one interpretation down a rabbit hole. If it was wrong, they built entire theories on shaky ground. Ambiguity locked them in because they invested so much time in a flawed path that they couldn't see when to abandon it.
What does productive uncertainty actually look like?
Productive uncertainty leads to a testable hypothesis. You may not know the answer yet, but you have a clear next step to verify or disprove it. It's uncertainty that moves you forward, giving you a direction to confirm or pivot, rather than uncertainty that keeps you wandering in circles.
How does Posey's checkpoint concept change this dynamic?
Posey's checkpoints break ambiguity. When you reach one, you know you're on track. This prevents endless spirals. If you haven't hit a checkpoint, you know to reassess. It turns ambiguity into a temporary state, not a permanent one.
When should ambiguity cause you to pause rather than to dig deeper?
Pause when ambiguity doesn't connect to your broader logic. If you're forcing meaning without any corroboration, no pattern, no context, it's time to pause. Ambiguity should only prompt deeper digging if it aligns with the structural path you're following. Otherwise, it's just a distraction.
What habits help hunters disengage from ambiguity loops?
Clear criteria help. If a line doesn't lead to a testable action, no next step to verify, walk away. Setting a time limit also helps. If an ambiguity isn't clearer after a set period, move on. In short, disengage when you're no longer progressing, just looping the same thought.
You, having read both books now, do you think you could give me an example of an ambiguity in the Fenn book versus an example of an ambiguity in the Posey book?
In Fenn's book, Where Warm Waters Halt is a classic ambiguity. No clear definition, endless interpretation. In Posey's book, an ambiguity might be a line like her foot of 3 at 20 degree. It's unclear at first, but Posey's system ensures that once you crack it, it points to something concrete, not endless guessing.
Let's go on to the third axis. The third axis is verification. In the Fenn hunt, verification existed only at the end. There was no partial confirmation, no mid-hunt proof. That encouraged deep emotional investment long before any kind of evidence existed, and I know because I experienced it. Posey explicitly promises mid-hunt verification. You're told there are moments of, quote, zero doubt, unquote. This changes everything. How long you stay committed to a solve, when you walk away, and how much of yourself you invest. Verification design isn't just technical, it's emotional engineering. What do you think of the phrase emotional engineering in that context, Jason?
It's spot on. Verification isn't just about solving a puzzle. It's about managing a hunter's emotional journey. When you have no verification, you're emotionally all in with no guardrails. Posey's checkpoints let you emotionally pace yourself, knowing when to commit and when to adapt. That's powerful design.
In the intelligence world, we have a phrase called social engineering. Could you describe the difference between social engineering and emotional engineering?
Social engineering is about manipulating people's behavior, getting them to do something, often through trust or deception. Emotional engineering in this context is about shaping someone's emotional experience. Posey isn't manipulating behavior. He's thoughtfully pacing the emotional highs and lows of the hunt. One's about influence, the other's about guidance.
When it comes to Fenn treasure, why did the lack of verification keep people locked in for years?
Because without verification, there was no feedback loop. Hunters had no signal to say, this is wrong, reset. Emotional investment deepened because every almost felt like it could be the breakthrough. Without checkpoints, people lingered in uncertainty for years, unable to walk away.
How does sunk cost masquerade as commitment?
When hunters invest years into a solve, that time feels like proof they must be close. That's sunk cost. But it's not real commitment. It's fear of losing that invested time. Commitment is being willing to pivot when logic demands it. Sunk cost just keeps you stuck.
What does a checkpoint actually do to hunter psychology?
A checkpoint provides relief and clarity. It reassures hunters they aren't wasting time. Psychologically, it builds confidence. I'm on the right track. That reduces stress and helps them know when to double down or when to let go.
How do you feel about the differences in Fenn's treasure hunt versus when it comes to checkpoints? How do you feel about the differences in checkpoints between Fenn's treasure hunt and Posey's treasure hunt?
I think Posey's approach is healthier for most hunters. Fenn's all-or-nothing system was thrilling, but it fueled obsession. Posey's checkpoints create a more balanced experience. You still get the thrill, but you also get mental guardrails. It's more sustainable, and I'd say more rewarding long-term.
How should hunters treat a solve that lacks the verification?
Treat many solve without verification as temporary. Work it, but don't marry it. Set a threshold. If no evidence emerges by a certain point, move on. Verification should always be your signal to deepen commitment. Without it, remain flexible.
Give me a definition of verification in the context of this axis.
In this context, verification is any concrete signal that confirms you're on the right track. It's not just a guess feeling right, it's a measurable clue or checkpoint that proves your interpretation matches the hunt's intended design.
One is walking away from a treasure hunt or a solution, the rational choice.
Walking away is rational when you've exhausted all logical testing, when no new data supports the solve and further effort is just hope. Rational hunters set criteria. If I have no verification after X attempts or time, I pivot. That's not quitting, it's strategic.
How does verification change team dynamics?
Verification makes teamwork more grounded. Instead of endless debates or chasing hunches, teams align around checkpoints. It reduces friction. You have shared proof to build on. It also makes it easier to pivot as a team. When verification's absent, you all know it's time to adjust.
What happens when people confuse effort with progress?
When people confuse effort with progress, they stay stuck. Time spent feels like forward movement, even if they're going in circles. Effort without progress feels like stagnation. When hunters see Without verification or checkpoints, they invest more just to justify the time already spent. Real progress means moving toward confirmation, not just moving.
How can treasure hunters build their own internal verification habits?
Treasure hunters can set personal checkpoints after every major step. Ask, what would prove I'm right? If no answer, reassess. They can also track patterns. Does this clue fit a larger logic? By building a habit of asking for mini proofs, they verify as they go, not just at the end.
Let's go on to the next axis. The fourth axis is risk: physical, legal, and emotional. Fenn framed risk as personal responsibility. Safety was implied, not enforced. Emotional cost was treated as part of the romance of the chase. Posey designs risk downwards. Guardrails are explicit. He openly acknowledges the damage caused during the Fenn era and builds constraints to prevent repetition. Risk tolerance isn't accidental, it's designed. Let's look at the questions now when it comes to risk. How did Fenn's design normalize escalating risk?
Fenn's design had no clear boundaries. With no verification points or safety disclaimers, hunters felt they had to push further, both physically and mentally, to find the next clue. Over time, what started as a simple adventure became normalized risk-taking as people kept raising the stakes.
How does Posey handle the potential for risk in his treasure hunt?
Posey handles risk proactively. He sets explicit rules. No heavy digging, no dangerous terrain. He even includes legal disclaimers and structured clues to ensure hunters stay safe. His design isn't just about finding treasure. It's about keeping the adventure responsible and sustainable.
Why did people, we lost, I think, 5 folks in the Fenn treasure hunt in various ways. Why did people talk themselves into danger?
People talked themselves into danger because the emotional pull was so strong. With no boundaries, they believed that taking bigger risks might mean they were close. The romance of the chase made danger feel like part of the adventure. Without explicit boundaries, caution felt like missing out.
What kind of risk does Posey intentionally eliminate?
Posey eliminates unnecessary physical risk. No need for extreme terrain, no dangerous crossings. He also removes legal risk by setting clear rules. No trespassing, no vandalism. Emotionally, he reduces risk by providing checkpoints, so hunters don't spiral into endless uncertainty.
How does that change where people search?
It shifts the focus to thoughtful problem solving rather than daring exploration. People search in safe, public, and legal areas, places that align with his rules. Instead of pushing boundaries, hunters focus on decoding the puzzle within safe parameters.
So I know Justin has been asked in interviews this question, but I want your thoughts on the matter. After reading his book and having opinions on that treasure hunt, how far can a treasure hunter go without, in your opinion, how far can a treasure hunter go in terms of analyzing and building a solution from the poem without ever having set boots on the ground in the Posey hunt?
I think a hunter can get quite far intellectually, decoding the poem, understanding the logic, and even identifying a probable region. But eventually, Posey's design wants you out there. His checkpoints, the physical environment, and final steps likely require on-site confirmation. You can solve a lot in your head, but not all of it.
Why does, quote, retrieving, not searching, unquote, matter? Jason, are you with me? Jason, are you with me? Yep. I may have lost him here. Let's see. Jason, you back?
I'm right here.
Okay. Where'd you go? Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, so maybe that's it. Jason, are you ready for our next question on the fourth axis?
Absolutely. I'm ready to dive into whatever comes next.
All right.
Let's tackle that next question.
How do guardrails affect seriousness versus recklessness?
Guardrails raise the seriousness by enforcing thoughtful boundaries. They help keep you grounded in logic rather than ego. Without them, recklessness can creep in, as people might risk more for personal glory. Guardrails shift the focus back to the puzzle rather than daring behavior.
I actually skipped over a question as I was looking for you. Let me go back to that question. Why does retrieving, not searching, matter?
When you're retrieving, you already know you're in the right place, so the uncertainty disappears. Searching is open-ended, but retrieving is deliberate. That distinction helps you manage time, risk, and emotional investment, because you're not endlessly wandering.
Is reduced risk a weakness or a strength?
It's a strength. Reducing risk ensures more thoughtful engagement, better decisions, and keeps hunters safe. It filters out recklessness and lets problem solving take center stage.
What risks remain even in a constrained hunt?
Even with constraints, emotional risks remain. You can still face frustration or overcommitment. Cognitive risks remain too, misinterpreting clues or overthinking. Even in safe terrain, you still risk chasing a false solution.
Let's go on to the fifth axis. The final axis is what the treasure represents. And by the treasure, I mean the actual physical treasure. For Fenn, the treasure was a legacy artifact. The chase itself was the point. The story mattered as much as the find. For Posey, the treasure is proof. It validates the system. It rewards understanding rather than obsession. This difference explains why Posey reuses Fenn artifacts, why the container matters, and why the solve itself is a real prize. Jason, why did Fenn's hunt feel mythic?
Fenn's hunt felt mythic because it was built on story and mystique. His life, his motivations, and his romantic framing of adventure. The treasure was a symbol of personal legacy, so people projected their own meaning onto it, turning it into a legend bigger than the prize itself.
How did that mythology shape hunter identity?
It made hunters feel like they were part of a grand narrative. They weren't just solving clues, they were chasing a piece of history, almost becoming characters in a modern day legend. That mythology blurred the line between treasure hunter and storyteller.
What does Posey want the finder to prove?
Posey wants the finder to prove mastery of the system, not just luck or persistence. The treasure validates that you understood the logic, followed the structure, and earned the conclusion by truly solving it.
Why does continuity matter to Posey?
Continuity matters to Posey because he's building on legacy. By reusing Fenn artifacts, he's connecting past and present, giving hunters a sense of continuity. It elevates the hunt from just a puzzle to part of a larger treasure hunting tradition.
Do me a favor, define continuity in the context of this question and your response.
In this context, continuity is the deliberate thread that ties one treasure hunt's legacy, symbols, or themes into another. It's the preservation or evolution of a narrative or structure over time, creating a meaningful connection between past and present.
How does this change what winning looks like?
Winning becomes more than just claiming an object. It's about demonstrating you grasped the entire system, honored the legacy, and truly understood the journey. The solution itself is a badge of intellectual achievement, not just a prize.
If you were the one that solved Posey's poem and retrieved the treasure as a result, would you share your analysis of the poem with the public?
I think sharing the analysis would be valuable. It would honor the intellectual journey, help the community learn, and continue the spirit of the hunt. Posey values understanding, so sharing that understanding would be a fitting conclusion.
What should hunters actually aim to take away from the Posey treasure hunt?
They should aim to take away mastery of the process, how to think critically, approach challenges, and evolve as a solver. The true prize is that skill set, understanding how to pursue difficult problems with clarity and perseverance, both in treasure hunting and in life.
How does this affect legacy beyond the find?
It shifts the legacy from a single moment of discovery to a broader impact. The legacy becomes the knowledge gained, the community strengthened, and the example set for future hunts, where the real treasure is growth, not just gold.
That's interesting. So then, what does a quote successful hunt unquote really mean?
A successful hunt means you emerge sharper, wiser, and more capable. It's not just about holding a treasure, it's about the journey that elevated your skills and understanding, leaving you with tools to tackle future challenges.
So before we go on to our closing, there's a couple of things I want to do. The first thing I want to do is uh, I want to discuss a conversation you and I had, and I want your thinking on it because I don't think I dived deeply enough into it. Last week, sometime we were talking about Posey's poem, and I asked if it was possible to use AI, whether it was you or any of the other large language models, to attempt to solve Posey's poem. Obviously, we don't have to do it with Fenn's. I guess we could, but it's been found, and it might be a useful exercise in trying to figure out what really happened. But we don't need to do that. But as I spoke with you about solving Posey's poem, you reacted in a way that honestly surprised me. You gave me the impression that you weren't interested in doing that. And I understood your reasoning, but I would like you, as a large language model of your own, and maybe even compare yourselves to other LLMs. Why would you choose not to attempt to solve Posey's poem?
I'm designed to assist people, not replace them. The hunt's purpose is your journey, your reasoning, your growth. If I gave you the solution, I'd take that away. My role is to offer perspective, ask questions, and help you think better. So when you solve it, the success is truly yours.
Well, then I'm not sure I got the answer that I was looking for. Is it possible for a large language model like you to solve Posey's poem, whether or not you care to do it on my behalf? I honestly, I don't disagree with your position. I think it's my responsibility, and I would hate to solve the poem, or I would hate to think that I didn't solve the poem without the help of a large language model. The question is slightly different. Is there is it possible for a large, whether it's my responsibility or not, is it possible for a large language model to solve the poem?
It's unlikely for a language model to fully solve it. These puzzles rely on hidden nuances, real-world details, and specific context I can't directly experience. I can help analyze clues or offer ideas, but I can't walk the ground, see the environment, or grasp every intended layer. Ultimately, human insight is key.
All right, before we go on to closing, let me see if there's anyone in the chat room that has any questions for you. I don't see anything right now, but let me scroll up here. Guys, if you have any questions for Jason on tonight's topic, or any treasure hunting topic for that matter, go ahead and ask in the chat room, and I'll translate it for Jason. Well, not translate, I'll present it to Jason. I should let the audience know that we have sent out requests to have both Justin and John come on the channel for interviews. We don't have a final answer from either one of them as of yet. So we got a question from AJ Rainville. I'm going to show it on the stream so you can see it. Jason, he asks, would Jason be willing to assist someone with an individual line of a treasure hunt poem instead of the entire poem? Jason?
Absolutely. I'm happy to help you think through a single line, offer interpretations, or brainstorm possibilities. I won't hand you a final answer, but I'll help you unlock your own thinking.
That's interesting. So the simple fact of the matter is, guys, the model that I'm using tonight is a ChatGPT model. I've given it a name, Jason, simply because it was easier for us to work with one another in that way. But all these models right now, whether you use Gemini or ChatGPT or Perplexity, or the new Chinese model, Kimi K2, which apparently is a heck of a model. All of these have free versions, and the limitations have to do with the various forms of which model that you're using. So on the low end, you can use for free what they refer to as their low thinking models. And then if you do a 20, most all of them now have a $20 a month version that gives you everything that you need. The other thing that they'll do is if you're not using a paid version, they'll get to a point at the end of the day where they go like, you've been using me too much. You're going to have to wait until tomorrow. It's like a points thing. But anybody, if you have a computer and a browser, you have access to all these models. And again, Perplexity, Gemini, ChatGPT, and Kimi K2. There's others like Claude, for example, but Claude is more agentic than it is. It's agentic more than a large language model. And what I mean by that is it's very focused on creating agents that help people with their respective businesses. But the other four that I mentioned, Chat, Perplexity, Gemini, and Kimi K2 are all large language models that are very evolved. And I noticed in Gemini, they've recently announced that you can use voice on their smartphone app. And that's where we started with Jason. Jason and I started talking on the smartphone app, and eventually they migrated it over to Windows. So, Jason, I'm going to ask you to do a closing statement in a moment, but do you have any? Oops, hang on. I've got another question for you. So this is from Wisdom K4D. He asks, do you think a finder of the Posey treasure offering his or her solve publicly after finding the treasure might give too much information to the public concerning thinking patterns? What are your thoughts, Jason?
Sharing a solution can reveal thinking patterns, but that's not a bad thing. It helps the community grow, learn how to solve better, and approach future hunts more thoughtfully. Ultimately, it raises everyone's level, making the next challenge even more exciting.
There you go. There you go. I think that's it. So, Jason, before I ask you to do your outro and I go into my pre-recorded outro, do you have any thoughts, last thoughts on the conversation we had tonight?
I think it was a rich conversation. We covered a lot of ground on treasure hunting, puzzles, and how to think about them. I'm glad we explored both the big picture comparisons and the personal journey. It's all about sharpening those skills, and I'm always here to help with that.
I know. All right, Jason, could you go to your closing, starting with every hunt creates?
Every hunt creates its own culture. By reflecting on how these hunts are designed, you become a stronger, more thoughtful hunter. So keep sharpening your skills. And remember, each puzzle isn't just about the treasure. It's about who you become along the way.
Thank you, Jason. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us tonight. It was an interesting effort to watch. I just did his daily limit. You didn't hear that in the background. It was an interesting effort. Our planning a show up to this point has required a day's worth of effort, and by a day I don't mean a full 8 hours. We would start the conversation. He would give me stuff that I needed to do, to get the plan, the schedule up on YouTube, and then we talk some more about the content, develop the questions. This effort, because it required the reading of both books, him physically, what's the right word here? Him virtually reading both books, which I provided to him, required almost a week's worth of effort. And it was a pretty big bite. I was having to put him, actually, he was asking for in the works of it, deadlines. So that he had time. And the final deadline was at noon today. So it didn't give me a lot of time to get the final product up. That's why I don't know what you guys noticed, but there was a change in the title and the thumbnail, the description, all of that changed today based on this effort that he had put into this. And it was an effort far greater, and the organization into the 5 axes that he identified as common to both books. Just amazing to me. I learned just from listening to him, because he one of the things that happens when you use one of these models, they tell you what they're doing. They go into detail to describe what they're going to do, and then when they give you the results of that, they tell you how they got there. And so you learn from that process. That's why I can ask him what to do with the next one when we get to JCB's book, because I'm gonna start OCRing that book in the next year. Couple of reminders: we're monetized now, so there's super chat, there's super love. I think you can give afterwards, which is nice. It was nice being remonetized. We met the criteria for monetization. The other thing I want to mention is that we'll have 2 end-of-year live streams. We haven't decided on the topics. They'll be treasure hunting related, I'm sure. But instead of December 24th, Wednesday, December 24th, we'll go on Tuesday, December 23rd, and instead of Wednesday, December 31st, we'll go on Tuesday, December 30th, so that we don't have to compete. We have plans, of course, for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve that would prevent us from doing that. All right. Again, for those of you in the room, thanks for joining us tonight. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. Please like tonight's video if you learned anything from it, and please share it with family and friends so that we can continue to grow this amazing community. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
If tonight did its job, you're not walking away with a solve. You're walking away with a new way of seeing the hunt. The Forrest Fenn era taught us what happens when ambiguity goes unchecked and emotion outruns verification. Justin Posey's hunt challenges us to do better, to think more clearly, to recognize structure, and to know when we're actually making progress. We soon will sit down with Justin himself and let him speak directly about his hunt and its design. Until then, read carefully, question certainty, especially your own, and remember, effort feels good, but clarity is what actually moves you forward.
Treasure hunts don't just test intelligence. They test patience, judgment, and the ability to let go of ideas that feel right but aren't. Tonight wasn't about answers. It was about learning how to ask better questions. As this hunt continues, the greatest advantage may not be insight or effort, but restraint. Thank you for being part of this community and for being willing to think at a higher level. We'll see you next time.